Sefer Torah, she'll have a good son. She had the dream once on Tes Kislev. Got Yutis Kislev, she had the dream a second time. But at the end of the dream, they gave her a bracha. And she said, Amen. But the Amen on the bracha came out audibly. She actually said it. It was Leil Yutis Kislev, it was 3 in the morning. And the Rebbe Marash was he was getting up to start his day. Rebbe Marash was not a big sleeper. It says in the Basi Lagani that by the Rebbe Marash, he was very oizgerechent mitzayt. And in the middle of the night, he hears his wife say Amen from a deep sleep. And then she's wide awake. Like this. So he says to her, what was that? Garnished. What is garnished? He said, had a cholim. And she told him the dream. And the Rebbe Marash got very excited. And he said to her, such dreams you can't keep to yourself. Such a dream can have to do with the most important things in the world. And he went to the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek and the Rebbe Marash lived in the same house. So he pushed one through the door that separated the two apartments. He walked in some taten, and he told the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Maisa. So Tzemach Tzedek told the Rebbe Marash that she should come herself and tell him the dream. So he went back to her, and whatever she had to do. She came into the Shved, the Rebbe, the Shved, the Tzemach Tzedek was her father-in-law, and she repeated the dream, and the Tzemach Tzedek said that they should do it. So the Rebbe Marash hired a sefer to start to write. And she became pregnant. So she bought material, the Rebbe Rivka, and she started to sew herself the mitpachas, the shirt for the Sefer Torah. She started to sew it herself. The Sefer Torah was finished Mistama Elul. These dreams were in Kislev Elul. The Rebbe Marash wanted to make a bigger Chassidus Sefer Torah and invite a lot of people, a celebration. Anytime you make a Siyum Sefer Torah, it's a big deal, yeah? When special noch that's connected to such a story, and the Tzemach Tzedek said, no. I'll tell you when the Siyum will be. And once Mamish Mitnacht, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, Tzemach Tzedek suddenly summons the Rebbe Marash, mach the Siyum jetzt. They brought the Sefer with the Sefer Torah, and there was nobody there. Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Marash, and the Sefer. They finished the Sefer Torah, and the Tzemach Tzedek picked up the Sefer, and they walked through the streets of Lubavitch in the middle of the night. The Rebbe Marash held the candle, and the Misharos held the chuppah, and that's how they walked. There was a shikir laying on the side of the road, and he wakes up and he sees the Rebbe gate, the Tzemach Tzedek is holding his Sefer Torah, and next to him is walking his son, the Rebbe Marash, and they're holding a candle, and the Misharos. So when he woke up in the morning, he came into the Beis Medrash and he told people what he saw. So they told him, "Your mom is such a drunk that you're hallucinating. There was no way that could have happened." Then the Rebbe Rashabs was born Chav Mar Cheshvan. So the bris was scheduled for Chav Zayin Cheshvan. So a big oilam came. It was a simcha in the Beis Harav. Tzemach Tzedek's Einikel, not Ur Einikel. And the Rebbe Achei Temimim was still alive. She passed away that year in Tevis. This was Cheshvan. And they prepared to feed all the Chassidim who came to the Simcha. In the middle of the night, Tzemach Tzedek comes out of his room and he calls his granddaughter. This is the Rebbe Rashabs, the boy who had the bris that morning, who was supposed to have the bris that morning. His older sister, her name was Deveda Leah. Her married name was Ginsburg. She married a Yid named Ginsburg. And he tells her, Gei Zog de Tate, Tzemach Tzedek called her, Gei Zog de Tate's Heint wird nicht sein dem bris. Go tell your father today is not going to be the bris. So she went from the Zaydah to tell her father. But the Baba spotted her. And the Baba, the Rebbe Achei Temimim, knew that her husband, Tzemach Tzedek, was Pravit Shtikis. She already knew not to trust her. So she stops her. You have to know that Rebbe Achei Temimim, she was such a character. She was an interesting woman. She stops the Rebbe Achei Leah, takes her granddaughter, and says, "Wo gehst du? Gehst zum Taten." "Was gehst du?" "The Zaydah hat geschickt, the Zaydah sent me." "What hat Zaydah gesagt?" "The Zaydah gesagt, sagen dem Taten, das Heint wird nicht sein der Bris." She says, "Geh zurück zum Zaydah." And says, "Ich hab gesagt, Heint wird ja sein der Bris. We didn't cook for nothing." So she turned, what are you supposed to do? She was 6 or 7, how old could she have been? Maybe she was even 5. She turns around.
She was married.
No, she was a Rebbe Rashabs. She got married later. She was a Rebbe Rashabs. She was a Rebbe Rashabs sister. The Rebbe Rashabs was the 3rd or the 4th of 6 children. She was the oldest. How many years could have been between them? She turns around and goes back to the Zayda, and she tells the Zayda, the Baba gesagt. Anyway, Tzemach Tzedek didn't argue. He waits an hour or 2, comes out of his room, calls her again. Geh sagt dem Taten, heint wird nicht sein der Bris. The Rebbe Achei Mushka intercepts her again and says, ich hab gesagt, we didn't cook all this food for nothing because you had this one of these moods of yours, these religious Rebbe's moods. So again, the Tzemach Tzedek doesn't argue. Happens 3 times. Anyway, after 3 times, the Rebbe Achei Mushka tells the Tzemach Tzedek, ich sag das als Bas Talmud Chacham. They had a lot of Shalom Bayis issues. Shalom Bayis issues. There's no other relation to the Rebbe and the Rebbe that's so interesting. Tzemach Tzedek and the Rebbe Achei Mushka, they were first cousins, understand. They were not just husband and wife. Their parents were brother and sister. They were first cousins. She was incredibly outspoken. Their mother, the Rebbetzin Chandel, the middle of Rebbe's, the Rebbetzin, upon him was a very strong woman. She had 7 daughters. They were very strong women, very powerful ladies, and they said what they thought. And she was probably the oldest. Like in Cheshbon, she has to be the oldest, even though she's listed 3rd or 4th. So whenever she argued with Tzemach Tzedek, so he would say what he said, she said what she said, and they would negotiate. But when she wanted to win an argument, where she knew that he's not going to push back, that he will give in, she would say, Bas Talmud Chacham. When she would say, I'm the Mittler Rebbe's daughter, Tzemach Tzedek he always gave in. And she used that sparingly, but she knew that if she says Bas Talmud Chacham, argument is over. Okay? So she invoked Bas Talmud Chacham, conversation over. So the Ekvate, the bris was davening, it's almost 7 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. They bring the baby in. It's not the pshat that the baby had not been checked before by the moyel. They open up the baby. The baby was jaundiced like the yellow of an egg. Forget about it. She was elderly. The Rebbe Achei Mushka, she passed away 2 months later. She was healthy, but she was elderly. She was around 70 years old. And she hears a commotion. Tumult. Was a geschehen? So somebody finally understood on the women's side that they took out the baby and they can't make the bris. It's a sakana. So she knew exactly what happened. She turned to her children and she said, kunst v'naya taten. The Tzemach Tzedek found another way around it. You understand me? Okay, a medical issue. Mitabol, the baby an hour before the baby was fine. And jaundice gets worse over time. It doesn't get better over time. An hour before the baby was fine. Mitabol, the baby's so jaundiced. The bris wasn't till Chanukah, a whole month later. And the Tzemach Tzedek said, Chasidim sind gekommen, haben sich gewaschen, and Tzemach Tzedek said Chassidus, but there was no bris. By the Rebbe Rashabs Birth, there wasn't even a minyan. Same thing, the tznius, just like by the Sefer Torah was such tznius, but the bris was the Zelba Maisa. That the Tzemach Tzedek suddenly calls the Rebbe Marash and says, go call the moil, we're making the bris now. And the Rebbe Marash says, was mit a minyan? No minyan. Was about the breeder? No breeder. Bring my brothers, the Tzemach Tzedek's children. Can I bring at least the Maril? The Marash had a lot of derechets for the Maril. And Tzemach Tzedek says, nay. There was nobody by the bris. There was the Tzemach Tzedek, the Moil, and the Marash, and that was it. And he gave him name Shalom Deiber. Shalom was after the Tzemach Tzedek's father, and Deiber was after the Achei Mushka's father, the Mittler Rebbe. Tzemach Tzedek Tatek Heis and Shalom Shachna. So he took one name from his father and the one name the Shver, Shalom Deiber. Tzemach Tzedek was the Sandik, versteht sich? And Tzemach Tzedek gave the name. And but Tzemach Tzedek given a seder that when he would give a name to each one of his children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren, he would immediately give them a kinoi, a nickname. And the Chassidim were not allowed to call them by their name. You were not allowed to call the members of the royal family, the Beis Rivka, by their name, even when they were babies. So he gave them a name, Shalom Deiber, und hat gesagt, Rashab. Und hat ausgeteilt, Bosor Shever. I said, Rashab. Reishin Beis, Rashab. Bosor Shever, who breaks the goof. And if you know anything about the Rebbe Rashab's life, that was There was Genoi that was exactly who he was, Basar Shevet. The Rebbe used to talk on Chof Mar Cheshvan. The Rebbe in my years, Bei Fabringens on his birthday. The Rebbe used to sell in my years when I was a kid. I was a bocher, and after Lamed Ches, the Rebbe made a Fabringen pretty much every year Chof Mar Cheshvan. And of course, they gave out a tape last night where he spoke about Kol Hayetza Mechamas Beis David. I heard myself from the Rebbe. The Rebbe said about the Siach of Kol Hayetza Mechamas Beis David, as a given a nevuah bruder. For the Rebbe Rashabs to predict what he predicted, when he predicted it, was a pure prophecy, because there was no evidence whatsoever of how much the world was going to change. The Rebbe said, 1 year Chof Cheshvan, I remember it was a Shabbos. As a given a nevuah bruder. There's no way for a person to have been able to anticipate how much the world would change and how much Achei Temimim would become negeya for the idea of Melchemes Beis David as it would play out. The Rebbe said it in Samach Aleph. He didn't say it in Ein Gimel, he said it right in the beginning. The Rebbe said it was a nevuah bruder, a prophecy, a clear prophecy. So the Rebbe used to bring often on the Rebbe Rashabs Birth, and he would talk about his name. That his name is Doiv Ber. Doiv means a bear, a beer. And it's not just in Hebrew, but it's also in Yiddish. Doiv Ber, Ibegesetz, like Zev Wolf, which means it comes down to a lower level. And the Rebbe said that a bear is Mesubel Babas. It must say someplace in Chazal that the trademark of a bear is that he's fat, that he has schmaltz, that he has a lot of fat. And the Rebbe said this represents exactly what his Zayda had said when he gave him his kinoi at his bris. Basar Shevet, he b'mevarer Gashmius. This is a little about the Rebbe Rashabs, whose Yom Haledes is tomorrow.